Every few years, a new financial model arrives in Africa with big promises. And this time, it's buy now, pay later. The idea of it is compelling. So you remove the upfront cost, you unlock access, and give millions of people the ability to own what they couldn't afford before. For many, the buy now, pay later model feels like progress. But the truth is, in many markets, BNPL hasn't failed because of technology, but because credit is emotional. Income can be unpredictable, and trust, that's fragile in a market like ours. So the question we're asking is, what separates the survivors from the shutdowns? We sat down with Angela Mukami, the Senior Product Manager at M-KOPA, to unpack what BNPL actually looks like on the ground. And if you're an entrepreneur paying close attention, then this is basically a masterclass in building a profitable buy now, pay later product. Before we get back to the episode, you and I both know this is not your first time on this channel. Now, if you can just do us a favor of subscribing before we proceed, it will help us go the longest way that you can think of. We've been doing this for 2 years. It's been such a labor of love. But now we need you guys to support us by subscribing. It's easy, it's free. 71% of you are regularly watching this channel and not subscribing. We love doing this for you. We want to keep doing it, and we want to have partners on board. And the only way we can scale is if you guys help us do that. We're always talking about startups. This is mine. So please support me by subscribing. Thank you. Now let's go back to the episode. So Angela, from your experience, why do some buy now, pay later models struggle while others endure?
Okay. So one of the things that I've seen in my experience, the products or the models that get to succeed versus the one that gets to struggle usually comes, or the difference in the successful ones versus the ones that fail are on product design, for example. And what do I mean by this? So if you have a product right now where the model is in such a way that it will over-index customers, meaning that perhaps there was a flaw in your customer onboarding journey, or if you're using sales agency, they typically tend to oversell what the product is supposed to be doing, or how the customer is supposed to interact with the product. Then there's going to be a mismatch in what the customer thinks that they're buying versus what the product is actually delivering. So when we see those gaps in customer onboarding or product design, or we fail to actually assess whether the customer can actually afford the product, then we're going to see customers take on the product, but eventually the model will struggle because the customer will probably not be able to find value in the product, or they honestly cannot afford it, yet they were oversold the product. So that's one of the things that we get to see as a key differentiator for buy now, pay later models that succeed versus the ones that are actually struggling. So that's one of the things that we get to see in the industry.
And what originally made BNPL feel like a breakthrough, especially in terms of financial access across African markets?
Okay, so buy now, pay later models are actually not a new model, for example, in Africa. Our parents' generation knew it as hire purchase. So my mom was actually telling me that in 1987, she actually bought a radio. You know, the ones where you put in a cassette, the ones that you used to do like this?
Yes.
So she bought a radio in 1987 on hire purchase. Back then, there was a company called ART, African Retail Traders. And any time she would get some money, after every 2 weeks or so, she would physically go to CBD, make the payments to the company, and they would record it on a ledger, like, customer Mary has brought 50 shillings today, and the next time she's brought 70 shillings. So it's a concept that we've been seeing since, 1980s, really. So now the breakthrough in buy now, pay later models is coming from the fact that there's now technology that is now embedded. When you look at introduction of mobile money, for example. We're in a space where a customer will make their micropayments directly on their phone. They don't need to travel, to where the company is to actually now go and make the payment. Yeah. It's done at their convenience. Then the other thing that we're getting to see is customers are now able to use the product even as they're paying. So back then, my mom could only be allowed to carry the radio with her back home after she had made all the payments. Now, depending on what you're selling, whether it's a phone or a bike or whatever it is, most of the time we're getting to see customers being able to walk away with the product, and we trust that they are going to make the payments as agreed, and they can be using the product even as they're making the product and even as they're making the payment. And the other thing that we're getting to see is, again, with the advent of technology, if a customer has not made payments, now the company can just, turn it off, turn off the product, or switch it off, or make the product not function as it's supposed to function. So if it's a bike, the bike will just not move. If it's a phone, the phone will just not be able to receive calls or make calls because there's a non-payment or there's an outstanding payment that needs to be made. So it also now reduces the risk on the lender side or on the let me say the company's side. So a lot of technology coming in that has just made buy now, pay later now look like it's something really great. Yeah.
And also English and terminology too, and how it's evolved over the years from your mother's times to what we call it now, BNPL and the acronyms and alike.
Yes.
What do you think the players in the industry underestimated when it comes to the complexities of lending in low income, especially or middle income environments?
Oh, wow. Okay. So a lot of the buy now, pay later models that are coming into the, African markets or Kenyan markets, for example, are usually targeting, the middle income earners or less than that, guys at the base of the pyramid. And what we may tend to underestimate is the fact that if you're targeting everyday earners, the Buddha guys, the mamambogas, the person who's operating a barber shop or a salon, they are earning income on a daily basis, and there's a lot of volatility when you're earning income daily. So when you're salaried, if whatever happens at the end of the month on the 25th or the 30th, you're going to get your money, you're going to be paid. But if you're operating your shop, your tuck shop, and every day you're waiting for customers to come so that you can make the sales, then there is a lot of income volatility that can typically turn out to affect the customer's ability to make the payments or not, because this week their incomes may be higher, next week it dips, or next week there could be protests and they cannot open the shop for the whole week, so they don't have money to actually pay you. So that volatility is actually real that we're getting to see. The other thing that we typically tend to underestimate is the cost of servicing and distribution. So when we're looking at buy now, pay later models, for them to properly penetrate, especially in markets like Africa, it's very hard for the model to be purely digital. Like you just have a really nice app or a really nice website and you expect the customers to self-serve. Most of the times, or more often than not, the customer wants to see somebody. So now you're talking about investing in a distribution network. You're also now talking about investing in a contact center, because if the customer has an issue or wants to make a phone call to ask a few questions, someone needs to be on the other end of the line. So when you look at all these costs that need to be come together, or these parts that need to come together for the business to work, just for us to service a customer, it tends to actually eat in the margins, because you really cannot run a purely digital model in Africa, at least in most parts of Africa. It's really impossible. You still need that human-to-human interaction. Yeah.
That's an interesting take. What does success look like for a buy now, pay later type of model for the business?
Okay. So success, in my opinion, looks like, it's marked by a couple of things. So the first one is where the product that we're offering to the customer is actually meeting their need. So we're living in a time when, because we want to make a sale, sometimes we can tend to, package something and push it out to customers. And to be honest, it may not necessarily be meeting their need. It may be a nice to have, but if it's not necessarily meeting a need that they think is valuable for them to get into a loan agreement or a debt agreement, at some point they will tend not to feel the usefulness of it, and they will back out of it. So the product has to meet the needs of the customer. So what problem are you solving for the customer? The other thing, or the other marker for success, is usually the angle of transparency. So customers typically, when they're getting into this arrangement, would want to know how much is the loan, how much am I paying daily, what happens if I don't pay, what happens if I want to return the product. So all of this information is something that a customer should be able to recite, even if you ask them a month later after they've taken the product. They should be able to tell you, my loan is 10,000 shillings. I'm paying 100 shillings every week for the next X number of days. If I don't pay, this happens. So that customer education also needs to trickle down to the customer's level in a language that they understand, so that they are able to know what exactly it is that they're getting into when they come into this arrangement. So yeah.
From your perspective, what have you seen about how Kenyan loan uptake versus repayment balance is? Are you finding that a lot of Kenyans are opting for BNPL as an everyday solution while not having the facilities to pay that make the payment back? What would you say from your years of experience in this space, or just your personal perspective of that contrast of, are you seeing Kenyans taking loans, more Kenyans these days taking more loans than before? Are there possible factors that you could think that could have possibly caused that? And do you think that the percentage is more or less on the positive side when it comes to repayment of loan services?
Okay. So in my opinion, and basically maybe from what I've seen, is that customers, they have aspirations and dreams, and just like the way you want a nice phone, they also want a nice phone. The way you want a nice fridge, or the way you have a fridge in your house, other customers or other people also want the same. So one of the things that we're getting to see is that, yes, there is that desire for customers to actually want products, whether it's a phone, a bike, or some household items, fridges, cookers. And the desire is not bad, but usually what trips them up, customers up, is the affordability factor. So when you tell a customer, come with 20,000 shillings stacked up together, especially customers in low income levels, honestly, they may not be able to come up with that, because when they're earning daily, they're also spending daily. So affordability is a big factor that affects the uptake of buy now, pay later, because customers, as much as they want to, have what you and I have, if they are not able to afford it, then they are going to be looking at options that can help them afford, the bike, the phone, the fridge, the TV, the solar kit. So it's just an evolution of, let me say, people's wants and needs and how to meet them. Because if you can't get it one way, human beings are gonna try and get it another way. So, but when it comes to repayments, what I've typically seen is that customers don't necessarily get into buy now, pay later agreements with the intent of defaulting or not to pay. Usually what happens is that there are a couple of elements that may prevent them from making the payments as they had promised. And one of them is something that we had talked about, where there is, the extreme shocks, income volatility. So if this is a customer who makes their payments every day because they also earn every day, if something happens to their earning potential, whether they're sick for that week or they have to take care of other priorities that, move them away from their shop or from their little business, then they will not be able to make the payments. Then the other thing that we're getting to see in terms of repayments is the fact that if customers do not know how to pay, because not all customers are literate, or not all customers know how to use your app to make the repayments, or sometimes when the internet has been shut off by the government, or there's a cable cut or whatever, if we have such factors and honestly the customer cannot be able to make a payment for the whole week, you may be tempted to think that this customer is probably defaulting, but honestly there could be other factors that are hindering them from making the payment. So it's not that on the onset, like, I'm going to buy this motorbike so that I can default. It's, I want to buy this bike to, I don't know, do my business, to do X, Y, Z. But sometimes during the time that they pick the loan and the time it's supposed to finish, life also is happening. And most of the times, we also, as creditors or as lenders, we need to actually be able to bake that in and know that our customers may be affected in one way or another, and how we're going to be able to support them, or what other safety nets can we provide for them in case they lose income for that week or for that month because they were sick or they were in an accident. So, yeah.
With the target market that has little to no formal credit history, how do you design a product that builds trust? Yes.
Okay. So specifically when you're working, for example, let me use African markets, the customers that we want to typically sell to are usually, especially sell to on buy now, pay later models, are customers who are everyday earners. And again, as I said, mostly usually at the middle income level or at the base of the pyramid when it comes to the economic positioning. At this particular levels, trust is usually a little bit low, for various reasons. These customers probably have not had formal financial education, like, for example, in other markets, or, they've been scammed before, or, they know someone who, the bike was repossessed or the product was repossessed. So there's a lot of mistrust. And one of the things that we can be able to do, especially when we are, or lenders or new businesses are coming into the buy now, pay later space and they want to sell to this particular type of customers, is starting out slow and then growing it out. Like, instead of giving a customer a loan of 50,000 shillings, why don't you start slow? Start them with 5. Let them repay. Next time maybe 7, 10K, 15K. So that every time that they borrow and they repay successfully, you're also able to build a credit history for this particular customer. Instead of giving them a loan of 50,000 shillings or 100,000 shillings, the risk is quite big, yet you really don't know anything, or you don't have any credit history of this customer. Then the other thing that we're getting to see, especially in terms when it comes to building trust, is the transparency angle. So trust and transparency go hand in hand. So if we're saying that you're going to buy this product and it's 20,000 shillings, for example, the customer should be able to know, this is the amount that I'm supposed to pay. I'm supposed to pay 50 shillings every day. If I don't pay, this is what happens. If I don't want the product anymore, this is what I can do. So that level of transparency is actually, it works so well because they know that you keep your word and it's black and white, right? And then the other thing that we're getting to see, especially in African markets, is that physical presence still matters. As I had mentioned, it's very hard for new companies to run a purely digital business.
You mentioned impossible.
Yeah. So customers still want to know that you have a location in building X and we can walk there if they need help. Or again, the human interaction when they're interacting with the sales agent or the distribution agent, where if they have questions, they know John is going to help me out, or I know where John lives.
Yes.
I can go to his house in the evening and tell him, hey, my bike won't start, or my phone is off, or whatever it is. So that human interaction is still something very important, especially when building trust, because customers want to know that I'm paying for this bike or for this phone or for this fridge, and I can see the company. I can see them here. They are located in such and such a place. So we really cannot underscore the importance of just having physical presence or transparency in our experiences when we want to build trust while serving customers on a buy now, pay later model.
Zooming out into a Pan-African perspective, why doesn't the One Africa strategy work?
Okay, wow. So, first and foremost, Africa is not a monolith. Africa has more than 50 countries, I think 54 countries, and all of these countries have, different people, people who speak different languages, different cultures, different beliefs, different religions, different norms. Like, you really cannot treat Africa as one whole block, because there are just so many differences. Just like even today, if you're a mother or a father and you have 4 children, they're all different. Yet they're your children.
Yes.
But they're also different. One likes football, one is mischievous, the other one is a reader, the other one has questionable character. So same to Africa. You really cannot treat Africa as one big block of market, because there's so many nuances that are happening in each of these countries or in each of these markets. And even when you look at things like regulation, for example, regulations are really different. Like there's some things that are permissive, you can get away with in Kenya, but you really cannot get away with in South Africa. Like, for example, in South Africa, there is affordability checks. Like, before you sell something to a customer, you have to actually be able to assess whether they are able to afford it or not. In other markets, not so much. It's not necessarily legally mandated in other markets, but in South Africa, you really cannot do that until you've proven or you have certainty that this customer can be able to afford the product. I mean, even when you look at identity verification, for example, in a market like Nigeria, we have a valid document called a voter's card. I mean, in Kenya, we really don't have something called a voter's card.
And then what is it called? NIC?
NIN?
NIN.
Yeah.
NIN.
So just even from regulation, you'll see very different, some big differences. Another difference that you'll typically get to see as you're moving from one market to another is the infrastructure levels are very different. When you look at payment levels or payment infrastructures in Kenya and markets where mobile money is prevalent, mobile money would work exceptionally well, and nearly everybody knows how to use it. Yet in other markets, for example, in West Africa, like Nigeria, we really don't have mobile money entrenched. Nigerians will typically then tend to use POS agents or bank transfers, which is completely different from how it is in Kenya. Then the other thing, when you're now looking at moving from one market to another, it's the operational complexity just quadruples or times X, times 10, because it is so different. I mean, how you sell in Kenya will be different from how you sell in Senegal, will be different from how you sell in Egypt. Like, just the operational bit of it, just to make sure that a market is successful, the complexity just balloons. So it's very easy to be operating in one market. When you're operating in 10, your level of operational excellence is on another level, because there's a lot of moving parts that all need your attention at the same time. And some of them are, houses on fire here, yet there's something that also needs your attention on this end. So you really cannot treat Africa as one market, because there are just so many things that are happening. And again, each 54 states have very different characteristics. So, yeah, you really cannot just say it's one market. Yeah,
I agree with that statement, really and truly. I think we have different cultures, although quite a plethora of similarities, just as we do have differences. I want to ask you a bit more about you. You have had a wealth of experience in your career from FMCG. You've had, in our introductory conversation, you talked about your experience working in Safaricom, ending up in big tech like Microsoft, previously a blue chip. But how did those experiences shape the way that you think about customers and distribution today? And more so, more so about building better products for consumers?
Okay, yeah. So on the surface, yes, I have actually worked in quite a number of industries, but I believe there are always some underlying similarities on things that you carry from one industry to another that that make the transition easier. So one of the things that I typically then tend to do as I'm moving from one industry to another is always having a curious mind. Just knowing that as I'm moving from fast-moving consumer goods to the telco to big tech, having that curiosity to learn and just knowing that, okay, new industry, new customers, new stakeholders, new terminologies, new problems to solve, that curiosity mindset for me has served me as I've been able to move from one industry to another. And another thing that I think about in my journey as I've been, moving from one industry to another is having customer at the center of what I'm doing. So whether I am working in a company that is, doing sugar imports, or whether I am working in the telco industry, or I'm in big tech, or right now, I'm always looking at who is my customer, what needs do they have, how can we best solve them, how can we deliver value to them. So always having that customer first mindset, because whichever industry you're in, there are customers that you're serving or there are users that you're serving. So whenever you put the customer first, then you will tend to be able to move from one industry to another, always knowing that I have to make sure that I'm delivering value to my customer. Then the other thing that comes to mind, even as I've been moving from place to place, is the fact that there are transferable skills that you will tend to move with from one job to another, or from one industry to another. So some things will always cut across, communication, how you handle conflicts, how you negotiate, how you listen, how you collaborate, how you, handle the team. So all of those are skills that are going to be transferable when you're moving from place to place, because it doesn't mean that when you're in fast-moving consumer goods, you're not collaborating, or you're not negotiating, or, you're not listening. So those soft skills will always be part of any job that, or have always been part of every job that I've moved into, because it's like the foundation of everything. Even as much as some jobs could be maybe more technical than others, you really cannot underscore the importance of soft skills that are transferable from one place to another. So those are the things that have been able to help me move from place to place. Yeah.
Would you say that networking is the biggest way to grow your career?
Alice, I really like this question because there is this notion that you can only grow when you network, or you can only grow or you can move to a new job because you have a referral. Frankly, all the jobs that I've been in, I really did not know anybody. It was a company has put up the
job post,
the job post on their career page. I apply, I get called for an interview. I interview. The series of interviews, because these days you just don't do one, you end up doing like 4 for a role. It's like really crazy. And then at the end I get an offer. But all of my jobs, honestly, I wasn't in a position where someone advocated for me to get the job. So I wouldn't necessarily say networking is the only way. Is it a good way? Yes, it is, because if we're being honest, there is going to be a percentage of jobs that probably do not get posted on the website, and they're filled out, either by a recruiter, or, a headhunter who sees you, or, someone in the office who says, hey, I know a girl who can do X, Y, Z, and you end up getting hired. So that bit is important, and we really cannot say that it doesn't work. So the aspect of the aspect of applicants being able to, be visible on all these platforms. Yes, it's a good thing, but there's also, let me say, a remnant of us that, we just apply, or we see an advertisement and we just end up applying, and by God's grace, we just, are able to go through the motions. So, yeah.
I like that response because, as you said, there's an assumption that you do need to know everybody, or have a connection, some form of nepotism, or some form of introduction to someone that you know. It does work, but we're also here to encourage people that who don't think it works, that it actually does.
Yeah.
I would say the same thing about myself. I think all the jobs that I got, I did apply for them and went through the interview process before I decided to become a full-time entrepreneur. Please subscribe. But yeah, what would you say surprised you most about operating at a global scale company when you joined big tech, as opposed to a localized organization from Kenya?
Oh, wow. Okay. So before I joined, big tech, I was working for a telco here, and back then I was handling like 5 programs, and I thought, wow, this is a lot of scale. And then when you go to big tech, how you understand scale like completely blows your mind, because, for example, Microsoft is such a big organization. I always liken it to a really big engine that has all these parts that need to move together in unison for the machine to move. So, just to give an example, a product like Microsoft Teams has more than 320 million active users every single month. That's a lot of users, even just, from a scaling perspective. Really, we're looking at, that's the population of maybe Nigeria plus South Africa plus maybe another small country. I mean, just to get to 320 million. And there are a couple of things that need to work together, as I had said, for that product to be successful. You're looking at product teams that are working on the features, engineers that are building the features, design teams that are designing the features, security and compliance teams, because in different markets or in different jurisdictions there has to be some element of compliance. You're looking at sales teams that are going to sell Office 365 as a product. You're looking at support teams that help customers when they raise support tickets. All of these parts need to move together for this product to be successful. But on the surface, you can just be thinking, oh, it's a little product, but there's really thousands of people just behind it to make sure that the product is successful. So the one thing that it taught me, getting or working in big tech, is the fact that everything is a system. There's a lot of now systems thinking that comes into place, where we're looking at one part of the equation, affecting another part, another part. So nothing works in isolation. Like sales teams just can't work in isolation. They need support teams, they need a product team, they need engineers, they need compliance teams. Success cannot or doesn't happen in isolation, and that was really amplified when I was in big tech. So yeah.
What mistakes do teams globally or regionally make when executing across African markets?
Oh, Alice, I like that question because it actually ties into some of the values that I think sometimes we tend not to regard when it's a global team, coming and working into with local teams. So one of the mistakes that I do get to see is the fact that some beautiful products are designed in headquarters without inputs from local teams, So product team somewhere will sit, in some headquarters in London or Silicon Valley or, somewhere in Lisbon, and they come up with this really nice product according to them without any input from the people who actually live in these markets, who speak these languages, who know the challenges that are actually in the market. So we tend to now get into a scenario where you have a very beautiful product, but when it gets to the ground in Lagos, it completely collapses because there are some assumptions that were never really baked in, and it makes the product unsuccessful. Not necessarily that the product was bad, only that there are some elements in the design process of it that really do not meet the local realities or what we call the on-ground realities. Then closely related to that is the fact that when global teams are only making, the only persons making decisions, and they're not giving local teams the empowerment to also do that, it tends to cripple or it tends to disenfranchise the local teams, because if the feeling is that we're not our voice is not necessarily does not matter, or our opinions do not get to shape the decisions that are in this market, and we're only being used as executors, what will typically then tend to happen is there's a critical or information that will never reach to the top, because local teams will be like, we're just here to execute anyway, So one of the things that I do believe is a strong value for global teams to have when they're coming to work together with local teams is the aspect of co-creation. You cannot design a product in isolation or when you're in London or in Silicon Valley without the input of local people. So co-creation has to be part of the equation if you really want to have the kind of impact that you're thinking you will have. And an ingredient for co-creation is also the humility angle, being able to just come and say, I do not know what happens in this market. Tell me what happens in this market. What are the problems in this market? That bringing yourself down to the level to actually being able to admit that there are things that you don't know and that there are other people or local people who know more about the problem than you do, will help you to be successful in the product that you're trying to launch in Africa. Then the other thing that comes to mind is the aspect of really respecting the opinions, the feelings, the lived experiences of the people in the local market. Having that respect is so important, because people know when you're just, playing around, or when you're just not giving them the respect that they deserve, or when you're just disregarding their lived experiences. So respect is actually also another key ingredient for co-creation to work, as well as listening. Because if we're not listening to the people, then we're missing a very important input that will make us to be successful as a product or be successful in the market that we're trying to launch. So those are some of the things that we need to be able to bake into the design process, so that at the end of the day, we can look back and say, okay, we have had inputs from this persona, from this one, from this one. Because every input, there's something that is going to add to the success of the product. Just look at it from the way you're making a beef stew. You're going to add a little bit of salt, then maybe a little bit of curry powder, a little bit of paprika. All of these spices are making the stew or enriching the stew, just the same way as when we get to the level where we're incorporating ideas, thoughts, opinions, lived experiences of different people as we're designing, then we're giving ourselves a better chance of being successful in the product that we're building. So, yeah.
No, that's a really good take. I do believe that people who come into local markets need to understand local nuances and be adaptable, so that you actually do achieve the success that you're seeking. Some final reflections. Angela, at the end of the day, what actually matters?
Oh, wow. In terms of product or from a personal angle?
Could be both.
Okay, let me do a personal angle. So what comes to my mind is the fact that even personally where I am, is the aspect of giving myself more grace. The grace, by grace I mean, because sometimes I look back at my earlier days in my career where I was constantly trying to, move fast. There was a lot of impatience, and there's a lot of trying to make so many things work at the same time. So just grace to know that things take time, and grace to also learn and make mistakes. So that's what I would probably think from a personal angle. I would give myself as advice to myself. Sometimes most of the stories that we do get to see of successful people, Alice, we're getting to see them in the harvest season. when you're young, you're in your seed season. You're looking at these people who've already gone through the seed season and they're now enjoying their harvest, right? But rarely do we then get to hear stories, or do we get a front seat of how it was when they were in their seed season, when they were starting out, when they were unsure of themselves, when they were trying to make things work, when they were trying to get funding, when they were trying to get the job work, when they were trying to make sales. We don't get to see that part. What we do get to see is the glory part. And the one thing that I've gotten to learn from myself is between the seed and the harvest, there's actually the aspect of time. And that's what sometimes as young people, we don't give ourselves, because we're looking or we're rushing to have the harvest, yet there's so much that needs to be done when it's for a seed to actually grow into harvest. Even today when you plant maize, for example, there's a planting, there's a weeding, there's, applying fertilizer, there's watering, there's all that is actually being done on the seed for it to get to the harvest. And between those two states is usually time. So I usually tell myself, or I remind myself, to have more grace on myself, and also to acknowledge that there is also the aspect of time before I get to where I want to eventually get to.
The harvest.
The harvest, yeah.
I think that's a good way to end our episode.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I think you can tell our audience where they can find you, or any relevant information you want to share with them.
Okay, great. So, audience, you can always find me on LinkedIn. My handle is Angela Mukami K. Let's connect and let's continue the conversation.
And for you, thank you so much for getting this far into the episode. My name is Alice Kanjejo, your lovely host, and I shall see you in the next one.